Welcome to Speak from the Body, a podcast that seeks to explore the wealth of wisdom of the body. My name is Avni Trivedi, and I'm your host, as well as an osteopath, doula, and movement teacher. In this podcast, I speak to experts about all sorts of topics to do with the body, such as touch, trauma, body confidence, gratitude, birth, movement, relaxation, and baby development. My wish is that you learn how to connect with, listen to, and respect your body. Today I'm speaking with Helen Sanderson. Helen is the founder of Ministry of Calm. She's a space therapist, interior designer, professional organiser, author, and public speaker. With her background in psychotherapy, she's an expert in the psychology of space and the design of quiet rooms and well-being environments. Helen speaks regularly at events such as Ideal Home, Mind, Body, Spirit, and Grand Designs Live. Helen helps people to understand how physical clutter holds them back from living the life they want. I'd like to welcome Helen to the podcast. Hi, Helen.
Hi, Avni. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I wanted to start by asking, how do you describe clutter?
I describe clutter as a set of decisions that haven't been made. So whether that is decisions about your objects or decisions that you haven't made mentally, then you get head clutter. But so it's really, I think one of the definitions of clutter is a clot. So it's a sort of a block of the flow. So you could think of a blood clot, couldn't you? So yeah, decisions that haven't been made really that stop the flow of life.
I like that answer because it's the lack of awareness then, it sounds like, that builds up to being clutter.
Well, I think a lot of people would be kind of very aware of the fact that procrastination is quite key in a build-up of clutter. But procrastination is very, so I guess like the husband and wife of clutter. It's like they're very married to each other. So if you've got mental clutter, it's probably things that you're putting off, and if you've got physical clutter, it's probably things that you're putting off, and often the two mirror each other. They go hand in hand.
So how does clutter in someone's living environment relate to what's going on in their mind?
So I think of clutter as a lot related to our mental state. So my mum always used to say to me, a cluttered room is a cluttered mind, and much as I hated her for it, I think she was actually right. So and it's true that, if you've got an exam to do, it's so interesting how we end up cleaning our room instead of doing the exam, the study for the exam. But I think it's not only that is part of procrastinating. It is also because of this desire to create some sort of sense of order and some control, so creating a bit of control of your environment, creating a bit of space. I often find that people have trauma or overwhelm, or maybe they've been through some life event that has kind of created a bit of a clot or a bit of backup. So maybe they've been through a bereavement of some sort, and then I think that the rebuilding of the self after some sort of trauma, the space kind of gets neglected. And so then that needs attention, and a bit like the way we neglect our bodies sometimes, and that then needs some attention.
Do you find that if someone's experienced a trauma, it's often a while before things have started to build up that they need support with? In the sense that, say, something, if I'm just thinking of things like a bereavement, people don't always notice how lost they can become after something. So it takes a lot of unwind. The way that I work with bodies, it's almost retrospectively that you have to help someone come back together.
Yeah, it could be several years. And I worked with a woman once who'd lost her only child. And it was years later that she invited me to come in. And so there were years of unopened bags of unopened mail that, that completely, when you're in a state of frozen bereavement, you can't deal with the flow of life coming into your home, and it just gets shoved in a bag in a cupboard or whatever. And then at some point, it's like maybe the winter of that bereavement, starts to freeze, and the little shoots of life want to come back. And in that process, there is, I don't want to live in this sort of nest that I've created, or this padded cell, or whatever it has become. So then people would get in touch and say, actually, suddenly I see it. Suddenly I see what has grown up around me, and I need help. I need help to shift it, because at that stage, for some people, it could have got really, really, really difficult.
You think people get surprised at how emotional the situation is, rather than it just being a physical mess?
I think so. And I think that's one of the reasons that feeds the procrastination, because actually for that particular client that I'm thinking of, going through all of that paperwork was representative of having to revisit the bereavement and the grieving process. So you can understand that somebody would want some support in that, that to revisit or to walk back through those years of shutdown, that to do that alone is quite a tall order.
And when you go into someone's home after a situation like that, how do you protect yourself? Because knowing how much I can pick up when I'm working with people and working with bodies, it can be quite exhausting. And then if you're revisiting someone's past with them, whether it's directly talked about or not, I'd imagine a lot comes up.
I guess I take care of myself in the fact that I don't do intensive days like that on like 5 days a week. I'm sort of, I contain it. I would always sort of have a bath and really kind of relax and take care of myself after a day, partly because it's exhausting, but partly because I need to replenish myself. But there's also there's always this paradox about decluttering, and I think it's true for what happens for me as well as for my clients, that there's this, at the end of a day, there's this sweet spot between feeling completely physically and emotionally exhausted and energized because the issue is being addressed. So, and I feel the same, actually. I come away feeling physically exhausted, but also energized through working through some sort of releasing process. And I'm guessing that's another parallel between maybe what you do with bodies. Releasing some sort of blockage is inspiring. And when you're doing something of service, it does feed you also, or it feeds me anyway.
And talking about being of service, you've created quiet rooms in the past. I'd love to hear more about how that came about and what it's brought to the different organisations you've worked with.
Well, I did a training to be an interfaith minister many years ago, and I was very interested in the loss of ritual, really, that our kind of secular lives bring. So the philosophy of that training was many ways, one truth, and that every way is every spiritual path has value, regardless of which one you choose, because ultimately for me it's whatever language it speaks to you. And so that was all about weddings and ceremonies and cross-religious marriages, and in the end, I didn't feel that that's what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do something that used my skill set to be of service to that. And so that really led me into designing, to my background of interior design, and designing prayer rooms, really, and then prayer rooms to quiet rooms and meditation rooms, and really creating this thing that I feel so passionately about, which is when you walk into a space, it can either feel like you kind of like your shoulders go up and you get really tense and you feel like really uncomfortable being there, or you can feel like you walk into a space and somebody takes that all off of you and you just go, ah. And I really feel that's what I want to do with my work, whether it's designing a quiet room or decluttering someone's home, that you walk into a space and you go, ah, and that space is then holding you rather than kind of upsetting and aggravating you.
Like, that just makes me feel relaxed just even hearing that, and knowing, like, say I've used in hospitals, I've used the prayer rooms before, and the same in airports, when there's just such a difference when you go into a space that's calm and peaceful, especially in a place that can be quite disruptive or when emotions are heightened and things.
I think those sorts of places are quite rejectic, aren't they? They're really busy. And I mean, I think when I started doing it, and it would have been 15 years ago now, the kind of offerings of quiet rooms and prayer rooms that businesses were providing were, you know, here's a broom cupboard. I mean, they were really, really bad. And it was quite embarrassing, you know, I think companies started to realize that actually, you know, if we respect and value our staff, we need to respect and value, you know, part of their, you know, their life practice. And some people can't leave their religion at home, so they want to bring it into their work, and that needs to be honoured.
Do you have any suggestions for people now that more people are working from home? And at the time of recording this conversation, it's the second lockdown. So there's less separation and there's more blurriness between work life and home life. So how can people organise their space?
Well, I think the people that are most challenged at this time are going to be people that have clutter. And the reason is because I think that for me, the home is all about lots of different compartments and containers. So you've got a room that's a container, then you've got your storage, which is a container, and then in the storage you have, maybe in your filing cabinet, you've got more containers. So how are you using your containers, really? And so people that have a lot of clutter generally don't have that sense of containment. So they have paperwork in the kitchen and food in the bedroom, and they might be working in bed. And so all of those kind of traditional containers really have those boundaries have got broken down. So I think that actually what we need to do is really kind of start to be more conscious about how we contain our workspace. And I've just done a recent little presentation about it, and just saying, you know, where can you find as your little workspace? In the same way that if I was talking to someone about creating a meditation room, or, you know, maybe they don't have a room, but can you find a little nook somewhere under the stairs, or a little tiny bit of the box room or something, where you can create that cushion or that meditation cushion that you go and sit every day. And there's something, you know, it's known that those habits and building those habits and sitting on that cushion every day builds something, and it will be the same for your workplace. So if you are scattered in the way you work, I sit here and I work there and I do it there, it creates this sense of uncontainment. And I think more now than ever, we need that container.
I'm glad you said that about working in different places, because I've never understood the idea of co-working or hot desking. Like, I so firmly believe that we're mammals, so we need our territories. So it feels like it's making people less grounded to be working in different spaces.
Yeah, I think so. But I think also, I mean, even if you're going to a co-working space, you're going away from your home into work. So it's like you've got that journey from home to work to switch modality. And actually, it's so interesting, because I've had this conversation with my clients who say, you know, I'm a doctor at work and my desk is perfect, and then I come home and I just chuck things on the floor, you know, and so they have this really professional life where they have to be really together, and yet they have a completely different relationship to themselves and their space when they're at home. And that is a lot to do with, you know, the different parts of ourselves that we take to work, the different parts of ourselves that live at home, and the different kind of modelling that we've had from our parents. So if you don't have that transitional phase to going from home to work, what do you do if you are that kind of person that likes to just chuck your coat on the floor or whatever, and you're a bit more laissez-faire about your living space? How do you maintain that professional working mode? I remember once, when I was setting up my business, one of the coaches that I was listening to at the time said, get up, if you're working from home, get up and get dressed as if you're going to work. Get yourself in that mindset. And so I guess what I'm saying is, and have yourself a work desk and go to and sit on that desk and tidy that desk at the end of the day, because it's all about how you, as I said, contain it, but also how you respect that ritual. And we go back to the thing about ritual of work and rest and play.
I wanted to ask more about containers, because I remember once when we were talking and you said that women love containers particularly. I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I mean, I always have this ongoing joke with my female friends that, we all sort of confess that we love browsing in stationery shops. And it's this thing about, containers, isn't it? And like, beautiful little containers for pens or files or whatever. And I think that for me the feminine is the ultimate container. She has a womb, she gives birth, and then the feminine. I mean, I work with a lot of mums who, if they've got a second child coming and they suddenly, or even a first child, they're like, I've got to get this room sorted, and they're really conscious of time. And so, I mean, it's maybe it sounds sexist, but it's a true thing that women do have the nesting instinct, especially when they're giving birth. So I think that, the container is, I always think of Russian dolls, really, the container within the container within the container. And for me, the woman has the womb, which is the container for the new life, and the home is the container for the woman, and the community is the container for the family, and then the world is the container for the home. So it's this kind of Russian doll effect that we have of lots of containers.
Paints such a picture. You were talking about people's professional kind of persona on their desk and then their home persona. And I wondered about the artists, because traditionally there's always been this thing that creatives need a certain amount of chaos to be able to create. And you have a background as an artist. So what's your thoughts on that?
Again, it's about container. I met a woman once many years ago who was she was an artist, and she had a flat that was absolutely immaculate, beautifully kept place. And then in her flat she had a studio, and you open the door and it was just a complete mess. And I just thought, this woman has just the archetype of managing to honor the two sides of herself, where her artist is allowed to completely be free and to play. And we all need that space to play, and we don't need to live in this kind of regime. And my house isn't always perfectly tidy, but I enjoy the process of reclaiming my space and tidying it up. So I think that not everybody has the capacity to have a playroom, an adult playroom, which is essentially what she had. But we can have a desk area. Or, I mean, one of my favorite things lately is that I found this thing called the study bed, which is a bed that, a guest bed that you can bring down and fold up. And there's a desk that stays underneath it. And you can have this desk completely untouched. So you just fold the bed down. And so it's like having a space where you can almost fold it down or fold it away again. And that's your little messy space where you get your art things out and you can be creative. So again, it's about not letting it spill into, like, I'm an artist, therefore the whole house has to be chaotic, because most of us have to share our space, and if that's aggravating for our partner, it's not such fun to live with.
And talking about sharing space, I mean, it's quite common that you can get a couple or different members of a family that have very different ways of how ordered they are. And how do you live without too much conflict if you have very different ways of living?
I worked with someone once who had an amazing sense of order, and her husband was amazingly chaotic. And he had two areas where he could be chaotic. One was his office, and the other was his shed. And so they'd managed to negotiate. She kept order in the family home, and that was obviously part of her need for her sanity. And then he had his domain, and she needed to keep out of that. So I think it's about negotiating, isn't it? Like most relationships. And I do have couples that contact me and they say, can you sort out my partner? And I'm like, well, if they want to be sorted out, because obviously everything, has to be done with consent. But even if you don't have conflict with space and clutter, then maybe you have it around the washing up, whether it's done straight after the meal or whether it's done the next morning. There's always things that kind of need navigating and negotiating, and I'm sure that's really the art of living in relationship.
That's just making me think that yesterday's dinner plates are still in the sink, and I didn't want to be passive aggressive about it, but they're winding me up today. So
it's not your job then.
It's my job. Okay. Why do you think decluttering's become such a big trend nowadays? Like Marie Kondo, her show on Netflix, when it dropped, I think it was the beginning of the year or the end of last year, it was just such an instant kind of trend. I mean, her books obviously have been as well, but decluttering seems like it's been a buzz thing for a long time.
I think, when I first started, and I remember telling my mum about it, and she said, oh, why can't people do it themselves? And I thought that was kind of interesting because of her generation. Women were homemakers. That was what they were kind of programmed to be. And so that was their domain. And you wouldn't ever admit that you couldn't manage your home. There was kind of a sort of sense of pride about that. But I think that, we've changed. Society has changed. People are a lot less afraid of asking for help. That they're much more open to, look, I've got a problem here and I need some help with it. I think that also we've been fed for maybe 30, 40, 50 years, shopping. And now we're seeing this kind of like people are realizing that their houses are full and they can't move and they actually can't breathe. So there's kind of like, I would say, a combination of lots of things, really. The fact that people realize that they don't perhaps need all this stuff. People are becoming much more conscious about the environment. Some people even say to me, I don't want to throw that away because I don't like the idea of it going on the landfill. So I'm like, but you like the idea of it filling up your cupboards, and it's like we've kind of got stuck in this. I realize that I've bought all these things or I've collected all these things, but if I throw them away now, that's going to cause harm on the environment. So that sort of that consciousness wasn't there 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think we're going through a change, and it's a really exciting change. And then, of course, Marie Kondo, she's a cute Japanese woman who communicates a concept really beautifully. So that's spoken to people and it's inspired people, and which is great.
Do you think there's a level where it can be harmful when people try to live within a space that's too ordered?
I think that any extreme is going to be, potentially problematic. So if you're an extreme hoarder and collector and you see value and importance and meaning in every single thing, that you can't let go of anything, that's going to have an impact on you, your well-being, and the people that you're living with. And equally, if you're so uptight that you have to, you can't see even a pen on the side, everything has to be put away, and you become a little bit sergeant major about keeping the home so immaculate that people are afraid to sort of even relax, then that's going to cause, unrest. So I think ultimately we want to try and find what's our middle way in all of that. People say to me, I don't want my home to look like a hotel, or I don't want it to be sterile, or I don't want it to be minimalist. And that's not my intention, to make people minimalist. I just want to try and help people to make their space work for them, really, and find ways of creating ease in the home, because I really believe that our home is our battery charger. It's the place that we need to go to recharge. And if it's aggravating you, either because it's so uptight and super tidy, or it's so cluttered, if it's creating aggravation, then it's not going to be supporting and replenishing you.
That's nice to hear, because you were talking about clutter as a clot, but then it's also the other extreme loses flow as well. So it's an interesting idea of the middle ground. And you mentioned about people not wanting to add to landfill. What do you say if someone's feeling guilty about, say, purchases that they've made that they've not invested wisely on, clothes that they might have spent money on, but then not got their kind of best out of and things? Because I think of people of, sometimes that can be an issue about letting go of things. They don't feel they've got their value from it, or it's been a waste.
That comes up a lot of the time. And I mean, sometimes people say, that's a designer suit. I paid a fortune for that. And because of the amount of money that they spent on it, it's hard to let it go, even though they know that they're never going to wear it, or they've grown out of it, or they don't work in corporate anymore, So, I mean, what's great nowadays is that there are so many charitable organisations that will take stuff. I mean, you can even get rid of your toiletries. You can get rid of makeup that you don't use. You can donate your suits, and I can't remember the charity, but I can send you the link. Okay. To where they'll repurpose suits, your old suits, for people that are unemployed and trying to get a job. So there are so many places that you can donate stuff nowadays that it can be reused. Ultimately, if you need to get your home sorted, you need to get your life together, and that will then have a ripple effect. So if you're keeping stuff because you feel guilty, that's not necessarily going to cut it. And so, sometimes stuff does have to go to the tip, and it does go to the landfill, but it doesn't mean that you can't then make a decision to be conscious about what you bring into the home.
Since we've done some decluttering together over the last few years, I've got really firm about presents, because when people, I'm grateful that someone gives a gift, but times when someone's given like a gadget or things like that take up space, I've just started to find a really strong boundary of thank you very much, but that's not going to work in my home. And it's been really helpful to honor what comes in. And that's not saying no to somebody, but almost setting a certain precedent, which, like, especially the culture I come from, that's just not the norm. People often do this kind of thank you, and it's not in full integrity.
And exactly, and I've worked with people that have had that fondue in the cupboard at the back of the kitchen cupboard, and they've never used it, and they feel guilty about letting it go because it was a wedding present. So, I mean, it is classic. And then the other classic thing is parents-in-law, when you've got children and they want, they keep buying gifts for the kids, and sometimes it's not useful, and the kids get overwhelmed. They've got too many toys, and there's constant flow of things. And we sit down and we talk about that, and often, I mean, we talk about the languages of love, and some people like to give gifts, and some people don't like to receive gifts. They like experiences. So, I think in those instances where you can have that conversation and say, I'm really grateful for your generosity and your gift giving, and yet what would really make me happy would be to go to the theatre, to go to the Lion King, to go to Legoland, or to have an experience with you, rather than you giving, so that we can create memories together, because actually those memories are much more important than, another Lego set.
And how do you suggest that people keep memories? Like, I'm thinking of if you've got young children, bringing back things that they've made at nursery, things like that all of those things are precious, but then over time they build up to being clutter.
Yeah. So again, so this would be part of setting up systems. So when you've got a constant flow of things, whether it's mail or, you know, my confession to Avni is my obsession about buying books. So there's a constant flow of books coming into the house. So you know, we've all got our hoarding tendency of some sort. And for some people it's cookbooks, I don't know, anyway, but for kids, so I would say to a parent, you know, termly collect them, so put a couple up, and then after it, at the end of each term, and if you can't do it at the end of each term, do it at the end of the academic year. Go, you know, gather them all up, collect them, and choose 2 or 3 really nice ones and put them in a memory box and clear the slate, and tell the kids, you know, like, we're going to clear the slate for a new term. And maybe if your kids like to be engaged, you can get them to choose which ones they want to keep. And that's a good thing to do with toys as well. Like, which things do you want to keep and which things do you want to give away? So teaching them, you know, that gifting is a good thing, that they don't have to hoard their own possessions. And so it's really about gathering, cycling, and I do the same with letters from school and things. You know, keep them for the academic year, then review, chuck them out, clean slate, and, you know, do it like that. So it's about having a clear mental system, and once you've got that, you'll be able to manage it much better.
Makes so much sense. And I've been quite influenced by a book called The Swedish Art of Death Cleaning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just the idea of being conscious about your possessions whilst you're alive, so that you're not leaving them for someone else to deal with one day. And like my family and I, a few months ago, we went through Indian jewelry and got rid of things that didn't have that sentimental value or that weren't ever getting worn. It felt so powerful to do that with my mum while she's alive,
Mm-hmm.
and not just be given stuff that I, you know, would feel some sense of guilt to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's really changed my way of thinking of your stuff can be causing you a burden, but also it can be passed on to someone else as a burden.
Absolutely. And I've had quite a few clients actually who've sort of got to that point where they're like, you know, I don't want to leave this mess for my kids. And, you know, there maybe there were PhDs that were done years ago, or you know, creative projects or things that actually don't need to be around anymore. And so again, if you're, and I talk a lot about mindfulness, being mindful about your relationship to your space, being mindful about your objects, what you're bringing in, what you're keeping, and so really being mindful about the stuff that you keep. And like I said, people have been in touch and said, this is the time I don't want to leave this mess. I feel, and in a way it's like taking responsibility for your life, isn't it? Doing that process. You know,
and the same for the planet as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Same for the planet. It's taking responsibility. It's saying, you know, that's done. I don't need this stuff around me anymore. And you know, I worked with people who said, look, Helen, I need to simplify. I've had a full life. I've lived in 3 houses. We've sold them. I just want to simplify and have a simple time for my last days. And so it's about, you know, paring down, and I always talk about keeping your precious memories intact. You know, so you're choosing what you want to have around you in you know, in your final days, and then letting the stuff go so that other people can benefit from it, or it can be recycled or repurposed.
That's such a lovely thought.
Mm.
I'd love it if you could just talk us through some simple steps of going from chaos to order and creating a calmer space.
So I think the things that I've been saying really about creating systems, I mean, I talk about with my clients mind mapping. So if we do a declutter process, the first step, and I tell people about the garden, it's really about weeding. So it's about going through your possessions and letting go of the things that you don't use, you don't love, you don't need. And so going through that process, so that then what you've, you know, when you were saying about keeping things that you actually want to have around you. Once you've got those objects left, you then purposefully find homes for them. And so when I talk about mind mapping, maybe it's rehousing things. So for example, you might have, I was with a client the other day and they had piles of paper on the side, and so things would come in the house and they would just shove it on the side, and it just created this sort of layer of chaos and clutter. And I said to her, that's because you don't know where to put it. You haven't thought through the steps of what you do with incoming paper. So once we'd established that as soon as something came in from the school or from the post, it goes in this tray or in this drawer, or this is where it goes. So that's about mentally mind mapping exactly what you do. And for some of us, that's really simple and obvious. I know what to do when the mail comes in. But for some people, it needs to be really mapped out and sorted clearly. So it's really the letting go of stuff, and then the finding homes for things. All of the things that are on the surface are things that are homeless, so they need to be given a home. And then mentally mind mapping that process. Another thing, this is a kind of a design thing really, but I've got one client who's got one of those wardrobes, no, not a wardrobe, but either side of the fireplace, they've got some units that have been built in. And we were talking about, well, maybe the kids' toys could go in there at the end of the day, but it's got this sort of ledge, so you put things in and they drop down. And we were talking about, let's modify this cupboard so that things can be easily put in and taken out. Because what I find is that if something's complicated and it's difficult or it's clumsy and it doesn't function, you won't use it, and then all the toys get stored outside the cupboard. So sometimes, it's really about just thinking through, taking the time to, can I remodify this? Can this be changed? Can I get a built-in bit of furniture or something? And then really just maintaining that. Maintenance is really key. People say to me, do you go into someone's home and then find that it's gone back again? And I say, well, only if they don't maintain it. So, and that's the thing. Quite often people want to have this solution that, I'll come in and it'll all be sorted, and it is. But again, it needs to be maintained.
When you talk about maintenance, do you have a specific time frame? Because the reason why I ask is, as a couple, we've got into the habit of, at certain times of the year, we'll do a big declutter, and then there's that very noticeable difference that the energy in the home feels so different. But I think that becomes a bit almost an addictive feeling of that, everything feels spacious, when actually the little tidying as you go isn't so noticeable. But it's like my attitude towards health. It doesn't need to be some big dramatic regime. It can just be little habits each day.
So I would say, are you a sprinter or are you a jogger? Not just to you, Abney, but so that's what I would ask my clients. So I'm a sprinter. I like to get things done in an intensive period of time and then make it easy to maintain. Some people like to do a little bit and often, so they're more habit builders. I would say my husband was a habit builder. He's really good at so it's really about working with a personality type with that. But I think it's really interesting what you say, because recently I just decluttered my kitchen, and it was just the cupboards, inside the cupboards, and I felt this amazing energy, and I thought, oh my God, this is what I do for a living. And I was surprised, because actually even just it is so powerful, even mentally, just having cleared the insides of the cupboards. Nothing had changed in the space physically on the outside, but the energy was completely different, and we were like, oh, this just feels so much lighter. So it, whether or not you do it as a once a year, sometimes people do a juice detox or a fast of some sort, and some traditions are much better at doing that, the consciousness of the physical need to detox. And we have this thing called spring cleaning here, which is, where we clean under the sofa and do the things, move things out. But actually, we don't have this thing where we have spring decluttering. And maybe that is becoming, more popular now, but if you don't have that one in, one out system going on, then you're going to need to dedicate maybe a one weekend or a couple of days and just have a blitz and clear out. Because I can bet you £10, let's say, that there'll be things in your wardrobe that you never wear. So so I think that it's really about dedicating time, isn't it, to those things, like to give yourself a fast or a detox on your body, or give your home that clear out. Or really, we're so, I don't know, fixated on what we can get, what we can bring and take in, rather than what we can let go of. I think that there's a real social shift that needs to happen in terms of, what can I give? What can I give away? What can I put out rather than take in?
There's a quote of "create before you consume" that I really like, and creating space definitely feels really just wholesome on all levels. I've got a background in Reiki, and so making the space feel sacred is something that I've always just done for a long time. But do you have any suggestions to people of how to make their space feel sacred once they've obviously decluttered?
I think that the process of decluttering, whenever we do that, we would really promote cleaning the space, because there's just something about basic cleaning and dusting that just lifts the energy and the vibration. But I think really just having simplicity, having the senses, not just the visual senses with simplicity, but also smells, soft and nurturing things, warmth, creating a space that's visually, sensually, music, those sorts of things. It's really about using the senses that I would use to create a space. So whenever I design a quiet room, for example, I'm using the elements to bring that kind of rooted groundedness, but also that connection.
Will you say more about the elements?
Well, sort of, if wherever possible, using glass, wood. I'm just thinking of one, using candles so that you've got fire, metal if possible. So finding a way of combining all of those elements into the space, it just brings a kind of a leveling or a grounding. But depending on if I'm working with a feng shui consultant, maybe the space is needing a lot more wood or a lot more metal or a lot more of something more than another. But generally, I would be working to work with nature and bringing in live living plants, so that they're oxygenating the space and bringing life in, because houses can be dead. They can have that real sort of energy of kind of bleakness about them. So what you can bring in, and not just in terms of redecorating or adding beauty in with objects and redecorating, but bringing in living plants or smells and candles and things that really bring a space alive.
Thank you. And your book is going to be coming out next year. I wondered if you'd want to just talk about it.
It's actually coming out in 2022.
Uh-huh.
So not next year, the year after. It's really a book of stories from the years that I've been doing this process with people. And I felt that there were lots of decluttering books already available on the market. And there is my home declutter kit, obviously. But I wanted to tell the stories of how I'd been moved by working with people. And because it is an incredible privilege to be invited into somebody's personal private space, people share their life stories with me. And, although I haven't told people stories without their permission, I've told stories of my experiences of working with the home and with the psyche of the home. So that's coming out hopefully in spring 2022.
And do you know what it would be called?
It's called Mirror in the Room.
Oh, a lovely title.
Mm.
Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Avni. It was great. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you've enjoyed it, please send me a comment on Twitter or Instagram at AvniTouch. Subscribe to Speak from the Body on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go to avni-touch.com/podcast to get the show notes. And finally, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.